Hey everyone, we have an interesting show for you guys tonight. Instead of my co-host Danny, I will be joined by our former co-host from the old show, Matt.
How you doing?
We are whoever is left, and today we're going to be talking about men.
Specifically, the male loneliness epidemic.
So before we get too deep into the conversation of that, we have to talk about men or bears.
Men or bears? I have been seeing that all across my timelines.
So a viral TikTok video has seen women being polled on the street. 7 out of 8 of these women chose that if they were stuck in the woods with either a man or a bear, that they would choose the bear. What are your opinions on that poll?
My opinion on that poll is that it makes perfect sense in the idea that you can trick an animal. You can't always trick a person. Like I saw people asking fathers about their daughters and how they would do that with my child. I wouldn't trust a man or a woman in the woods with my child because I can guarantee my child will be smarter than a bear. I can't guarantee he'll be smarter than a random person.
See, that I feel like you're missing the point a little bit. I feel like just outsmarting a person isn't exactly why women are choosing bear in this situation.
Oh, it's a safety matter. I understand.
Right, like bears you can trust to act predictably, like a bear. You can't predict what people are going to be like. So it's like, are they going to expect a man to be a rapist or a violent person if someone wants to harm them in some capacity? Or it could just be a nice, kind, responsible other human being who has no ill will towards you. It could be somebody who just leave you alone, but you just don't know. It's like the risk factor, the unknown in the situation.
No, I fully get it. That's why I laid it out as the way I did. Is that's a matter of what can you do against an animal versus another person. Is that the idea is that safety is the most paramount thing, especially for a young lady being stuck anywhere by themselves. If they run into a person versus an animal, you kind of know what you're going to get with an animal. 9 times out of 10, you don't know with another human being.
7 times out of 8. I think it's interesting that one lady out there is like, you know what? Men are trustworthy. I can rely on a man in a situation to not want to murder me.
I mean, that's normal for anything. It's like the idea that
I would love for this to be 0 out of 8. 0 out of 8 women would want to be with a bear over a man. That's like the goal. But yeah, in the world we live in, this is pretty understandable.
this is the same way which has led to this issue.
I just felt like we should open it up with this fun, very fresh points of debate between men and women in society. It's been all over the place lately.
It's always something.
So let's talk a little bit. What is this male loneliness epidemic, and does it deserve to be called an epidemic?
So what this is that since about 2020, there have been studies shown that men as a population around most of the first developed countries and other countries access to like higher levels of education and income are suffering from serious loneliness because of how, as we break down the gender norms of what we're supposed to be doing based on our genders, men haven't really found a safe haven to actually open up about their feelings and how they tackle them. Like one example, in the Los Angeles Times earlier this year in January, there were they are talking about how in 2023 there was a state of men report done by Equal that showed that 2/3 of the surveyed men between ages 18 and 23 says no one really knows me. Since 1990, the share of men who lack a single close friend has quadrupled to 15%, according to the 2021 study by the Survey Center of American Life. It's worse for unmarried men. 1 in 5 of them report that they have no close friends, and 1 every 4 of the younger than 30 have also no close friends. Now, you might be saying, why is that as far as an epidemic? What does that really lead to? It leads to them seeking companionship, seeking some feeling of community, which is why within the rise of the red pill and the manosphere, those people have had the ability to like garner all this attention. They've allowed a place to feel wanted, desired, or even heard, and thus that's leading to these men quite literally just going to these places that are not good for them holistically, but at least they feel like they're being looked at and listened to.
That's a fair point. So you said a lot of stuff there. Let's rewind and unpack some of it a little bit. So yes, you got a lot of statistics about how men are feeling like they don't have close companionships or a sense of community, not really having friends. The statistics about how dating life and being married is going for young men and men in general too, and those are sort of dim looking as well.
Well, hold on, I didn't mention as far as like necessarily the dating life.
Right, I brought that up. That wasn't something you said. I'm saying there's statistics about that too. There is certainly a lack in society of support in this regard, and there are reasons for that. I think it's really easy and important for us to point at probably the biggest culprit of why society is structured this way, and that is patriarchy. You want to talk about that a little bit?
We talk about patriarchy.
How men in general, not you or I, but how other men have structured society this way to cultivate a society of men being too tough to share their feelings, or how it's not culturally acceptable for men to feel certain kinds of ways.
Yeah, that is definitely a byproduct of the patriarchy that is being unraveled, hopefully, as we speak. But another byproduct of this unraveling is that they're men who are trying their best to kind of evolve with the times, but they feel like they're suffering the worst. In fact, from the same article, it highlights that the most progressive of men are the ones who feel the most isolated. It's the ones who are actively trying to be better, do better, and be more open, but they're running into the same kind of roadblocks. But that's more in how we live more in a social media society. As they said in this article, nearly half the men say their online lives are more than their offline lives. The virtual world with pornography and idealistic provocation is facilitating their withdrawal because they feel like a sense of like community and they're not being judged in the way they would be in real life. Because when it comes to like men approaching people in general, it's kind of like what we're dealing with, kind of like the man and the bear situation. So there are men who genuinely do want to do better, but they don't know how to go about it because not everything's sort of viewed through taboo, viewed through I don't know you, how, or what I've seen on also social medias, you have people get on the streets saying kind of wait the man the bear. Ask women, what do they think of men? What do they like in a man? And a lot of the times, men are being told that we like strong, tall, don't really cry, don't really share their feelings. A lot of women say that's turn off.
And it gives them the ick.
Yes, and so how can you tell a man that they want you to be more emotional, be more open, but then at the same point to turn off? We assume
I feel like in that kind of sense, it's not helpful to lump all women together the same way it's not helpful to lump all men together. So it's like it's not constructive. It's not constructive. It's not good for the point of conversation here. Because all women are going to have different preferences. All men have different preferences. But not every. We're not talking about monoliths.
And I feel that like this has to be kind of like talked about because for the most part it's been basically under the weeds and it wasn't until at least about a year ago like a prominent YouTuber named Sean had talked about the male loneliness epidemic and caused a whole wave into social media and people talking about this in conversations, which kind of led me to realizing what's actually going on because I have to be in a relationship for the better part of 5 years, so I haven't been in the dating world. I haven't seen my friends go. I've heard some stories.
It's not fun out here.
It is not for you guys, and I feel like it shouldn't be this hard. Now, again, it's been 5 years since I was out there, and I feel like the same things that were our structure are no longer the case. But like what I want to talk about is how this is being perceived and how like the first article I mentioned was written by a woman. There's another article saying the male epidemic does not exist, and that tagline is the media panic around male loneliness is driven by cherry-picked statistics and sexism. Now that's just sad. So immediately coming in,
it's dismissive.
This is something that could be affecting
So what's this author saying?
This author is saying that when it comes to the loneliness epidemic, it's citing that 57% of men, 59% of women are going to feel lonely. They're equally lonely. In fact, per se, women are lonelier than men.
Which is a good point. There's also just more women are more comfortable being lonely than men are comfortable being lonely.
Yeah, this is where they're kind of copping to the all lives matter ideology.
Interesting hot take comparison.
Another statement, there is no male loneliness epidemic. There's a loneliness epidemic. The rates of loneliness are rising, but not specific to men. These are demographic significant based on people of color are lonelier than white people, poor people are lonelier than rich people. Physically disabled people are lonelier than non-disabled. Gender-based lonely differences, male loneliness isn't real.
All right. Well, this author obviously had some goals to push with his piece, but just bring up a couple of decent points that this is a wider issue with loneliness in society. It's not specific to men, but this loneliness epidemic in general has different effects on different groups of people, and it's fair to discuss how men are reacting to this because it has some nasty repercussions.
In what way?
What lonely men do compared to what other lonely people do.
What is this like?
You were already making a point that lonely men are like red pilled and they're going into the manosphere and they're going into other
dangerous
yes.
mindset.
So that is one aspect of how male loneliness is perhaps a bigger societal problem than loneliness for other people. That is something in your favor, I guess, for the argument that you're trying to make, that this is something that's serious enough and impactful enough and worthy of discussing on its own.
My thinking is that the reason why those men are going to those spaces, becoming maybe more problematic than they could potentially be, is there's no outlet on the other side. There's no place that is inviting to men to learn, evolve, adapt on, let's say, the left. Because the manosphere is apolitical by its nature. It just happens to be, there is overlap.
There's a lot of overlap.
But if you look, like, I don't listen to, like, Sneeko, Fresh and Fit, Andrew Tate, I don't listen to any of those people. But from doing the research into this, 9 times out of 10, the people who say that they've gone over to that side are simply the fact that I feel like I'm actually being talked to versus being talked down to. And it's like, yes, men have done horrible things in history. No one's going to erase that. No one would dismiss that. But what men feel like is they're being dismissed outright because the system was made for them, but they didn't make this system. It's like the idea was, as a white person, if I told you, hey, you have it better than me because it was made for you, so it's your fault, so you should be a better person, you should give me money to do XYZ things because of my people have suffered on you. And I'm not going to dismiss what women have gone through history. I'm simply saying the people who committed these crimes are not always men in front of you.
Of course, and I don't think anyone is saying that the people who committed the crimes are the ones in front of them. Not all women are saying that the men who are problematic are the ones that they speak to in their everyday lives. Now, they could be. They certainly could be. And I feel like when it comes to men finding a sense of community and space for them on the left can be, in many cases, very insular. People who are in certain communities, like the LGBTQ community, people of color, they tend to coalesce around people who are more like them. It's like a safety network thing. So sometimes if a man, especially someone like me, who is a white man, a straight man, a cis man, wants to involve myself in a community, it's like I have to prove how cool I am. It's like, hey, I care about all these issues. Like sort of talk the talk and walk the walk.
Yeah,
so it's a little bit gatekeeping in some sense. But we have to keep in mind that these are other people's communities too. And while it's important to have a big tent, this is how some people, this is like their whole social, sense of community. Like this is their protection.
Which, in my opinion, not before saying anything, if you want to be a community of haven, a community of safety, you owe it to at least hear somebody out. Because yes, there's going to be bad actors in every walk of life, but if someone genuinely wants to learn or do better, and the first thing you open up with is you're a member of the patriarchy, why are you here? I'm not saying they're legitimately saying those words, but it's the feeling and it's the emotions behind the charges of the words. In fact, in his article, this person said there is no widespread outcry for gay loneliness or black loneliness or women's loneliness, even though there is much evidence to suggest loneliness is a problem for these groups. The male loneliness panic only exists because of the unspoken misleading assumptions that undergird the popular report about gender. One, if you see a man, you should assume the first to a straight white man, and two, straight white men are entitled to everything they want out of life. They don't constitute a crisis. So the idea that white men who are probably suffering from this are being showed that this only problem is affecting you, but at the same time trying to say there's a problem holistically. You see, like they're talking about both sides of their mouth. You can't say that there's a problem holistically across multiple demographics, but then say that because this demographic saying it, this is not a real crisis. Like I don't think you should ever be dismissive if you're trying to root out something you think is toxic. You're just going to grow and fester it. In fact, in this section they say that man in crisis framing is a red flag. Anyone who has covered gender politics for the past 2 decades, particularly those along with cooked and cherry cooked statistics, everything from Republican Senator Josh Hawley to Gamergate mother Christine Hoffman Summers, has presented some form of men in crisis narrative. It always ends the same way. Men in crisis, people say because of feminists who made it so that men are now oppressed and disadvantaged. In order to fight the oppression of men, we need a gender role reset that puts men back in the rightful place, in charge. A woman objects, that's proof that they are bad selfish people.
Let's unpack that a little bit.
Yeah.
Is that your stance at all?
No.
Okay.
I don't think it's a matter of like power dynamics shift because no one should really have power over another person. I believe there should be a real conversation involving any kind of issue between men and women because we've gone so polarized on any difference of opinion.
Would you use terms like oppressed and disadvantaged in terms of how you would describe men in society today?
I would describe men as society today.
I don't feel like I'm being oppressed or disadvantaged because I'm a man.
I would say misrepresented and misunderstood.
Okay. Why would you use those words?
Because the idea that every potential man has to be viewed a certain way is a trauma response. And I recognize men created that trauma response. But as like
in which way are men being viewed? You said certainly.
Men are being viewed as you're a danger until you prove you're not.
Okay, so look at everything.
Yes.
Okay.
And like as someone who's known someone who has trauma, who has suffered the idea like there was times in our relationship that I couldn't touch her neck because something else another man did. Even though it's clearly not me.
Right.
And she had, oh, we'll talk about it, go to therapy, I had to work around it. That's fine. I didn't care. I didn't want her to feel uncomfortable. But I don't think she would do that with a random person who has to touch. It would be a trigger response. And that's understood as far as a triggering response. But this is the perceived notion that the man is already a threat before he's done anything.
You mentioned therapy, and I feel like some data that would be really helpful if we had would be how many of these lonely people are in therapy. We feel they don't have anybody to talk to. We feel they don't have a sense of community. Are these people in therapy? I feel like therapy would give them a space to talk out some of the feelings that they're feeling in a comfortable, not so toxic setting, a place where they can feel heard. I think that would be really helpful. I wish we had statistics.
There are actually some groups that are being formed on the East Coast, like in the West and LA. You have things such as the California Air Force Club encourages boys to reckon with their very feelings. They're hungry just to be seen and to be heard, as their slogan. There's also another one by the name of Adam Dorsey, a 40-year yoga instructor, created a men's group of a friend to realize how helpful it is to have a circle to work out and talk. This was happening during the pandemic. So there are things being formed to help facilitate the men feeling a space of openness. I would say where they're running to a little muck is that we men naturally kind of seek companionship and like to be out there and meet people and we're really told how to like meet women and talk to them from either our parents, older men, or like our friends, and maybe if we have lucky, because not all men have female friends, but you shouldn't say. And that's a slow process. Like a different article from gives statistics of certain things through this epidemic. It said men suffer from more loneliness and likely describe loneliness as constant background feeling. 1 in 8 men in the UK report feeling lonely at least once a week. Half of men over 55 report feeling lonely, a quarter experience loneliness more frequently. Over 48% of men feel comfortable discussing loneliness or the feelings of isolation. Nearly 2/3 of UK men admit feeling lonely becoming academic fathers when they have a family already and have a partner, and they're still feeling isolated at 66%. 17 of American adults 65 or older just feel isolated being alone. And suicide rates are 4 times higher in men than women. That is linked to loneliness. I would like to take a moment to take in that statistic right there because that one is absolutely true. Suicide rates for men are sky high, and that is another specific consequence of why male loneliness is important to talk about because these men are killing themselves, literally. Yeah, along with what she's out, is like 40% of men experience feeling lonely every day. 40% of men do not seek help until they reach a crisis point. Yeah, that's patriarchy saying you don't need any help, you can do this, tough it out. About 1/3 of men report going a month or more with no social contact during COVID-19 ended. And as you know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we need people to live. And then as far as 30% of men in the UK say they feel uncomfortable opening up about their friends about being lonely. Like you're supposed to be able to be honest, but you can't even do that. Single and divorced men are suffer with loneliness than those who have a partner, as makes sense. Men who feel lonely are more likely to suffer from mental health issues, and more than 1/3 of men feel lonely at least 1 day per week. And these statistics, people like the other article poo-poo say that other people are suffering from that. Other people are having a problem. Like that's fine, but can we talk about this? That's why I equate it to all lives matter. During that campaign, it wasn't a matter of white people don't matter, Latinos don't matter. It is black lives are being affected right now. We should address that. And to say that all people are lonely, men aren't really that lonely, or it's not just a man problem, it just dismisses them. And it kind of, in my mind, it's like what they stand for, which I would say like the wave of feminism, which is supposed to adhere to equality and making sure people are treated correctly. You're doing the reverse for men.
I am not here to attack feminism on this episode. That's not why I'm here, and that's not why you're here either.
I'm not saying that's attacking feminism. I'm saying what represents feminism, the definition of what it's supposed to be. Like I would advise feminists for years, and I still say I am one. And that's why I adhere to the ideas of it, which I think we should take men seriously. Like if 1 in 40 men can't even talk to their friends about what's wrong with them, what do you think of people who have no friends?
Yeah. So you gave us a lot of statistics there. There's a lot of important stuff that we could break down and talk about. Let's just take a look at some of this. So We talked about men reaching a crisis point. Oh, this is from the COVID-19 era. How old is this article?
This report says for 2024, it was written as December last year.
Okay, so that's pretty recent, actually. Gotcha. One interesting question that we have to think about is how many of those male loneliness deaths are veterans? What do you think? I know we don't have specific data on that, but there's also a lot of veterans who are having mental health issues and committing suicide. Might be some correlation there.
So if I had to guess, one out of 5.
That's a lot.
Yes,
That's a lot.
I genuinely understand and feel that when it comes to any issues with men, especially the older back we go, the ideology and mindset that they had for how to approach these things wouldn't allow them to be more open or seek the advice and help to not reach that crisis point or the breaking point. In fact, look at this one for this is suicide rates. It says how shedding light on statistics, suicide rates are 4 times higher. The describes a picture in which, in the framework of this blog for male loneliness statistics, this hard narrative is critical in understanding the call to action. It signals to communities that policymakers and healthcare professionals alike that the dire necessity for strategies and interventions will assume this silent crisis of male loneliness. Hence, the understanding of the statistic is not just about number crunching, but it's addressing an inevitable crisis unmasking itself in society's seemingly stronger half.
I feel like earlier I wanted to respond to something that you were saying, but I'd completely forgotten because I am easily distracted.
Is it by the first article or the second?
It's when you were referring to this dismissive, like, all loneliness matters sort of argument, but the all lives matter thing.
Oh, yes.
And I feel like there are a couple of distinctions that we can make between all lives matter and what this article is saying, because loneliness is an issue that is facing all of society, unlike the Black Lives Matter, All Lives Matter thing, which is very skewed, towards police killing black people, unnecessarily police, just being terrible towards black people in general. This loneliness is affecting everyone. Society has become, in general, far more isolating. And not to ever dismiss these important statistics that you're bringing up about how men are handling this issue specifically, but I think it can be handled in sweeping kinds of ways to uplift people in general, men, women, isolated, LGBTQ communities, everyone who's experiencing loneliness. And I feel like a lot of these issues of loneliness that we're facing as a society in general, men and everyone else included, comes from us being in a late stage capitalist society where existing costs money.
The old communism.
No, seriously though, like that's why people don't have a sense of community, because they can't exist in the public space anymore for free.
You're right. I remember during college being able just to go to we used to go to McDonald's with friends and just be there till 12 or 1
and
o'clock in the
loiter.
morning.
You just loiter.
We just did nerd stuff. And yes, I definitely can see the correlation between.
I mean, the college in general, we were able to sit there in the student center and
for hours
just exist. It was a free place for us to be and spend time with each other and have a sense of community that doesn't really exist anymore, especially the older you get. Oh, I'm not in college anymore. It's like, okay, well, where do you go?
Yeah. I definitely could agree that we should have more community centers or more just places people to meet up and just hang out, relax. I mean, even in my own friend group, I have to now. We've done every 2 weeks when one of our friends has the weekend off from working. We just go over to one of the person's houses and we just chill and hang out like we used to in college, because with people having, children, going through school, working 9 to 5s, it's harder to be close to your friends as an adult compared to the teenage years.
Yeah.
But I would say that in relation to this topic, there can definitely be talks of, improving community, improving
the ability for these men to have more opportunities to work through these issues. My contention is that, as I said, men are being misrepresented and misunderstood, not oppressed or disadvantaged. Because as the article lays out, it's like, this wasn't a problem until it affected white men. This wasn't a problem because this was a patriarchal society. It's all dismissive language by simply saying, let's say there are some bad apples out there. Let's say there's some men who are just genuine, POSs, and they would do horrible things to women. But doesn't mean I have to assume every man going through this is like that. We have a very close friend who's been struggling for years trying to find someone, and we know they're basically a cinnamon roll. Ooh, but they'll be viewed like this.
It's an interesting point you're making. It's not one that I want to dwell on, but I do find it interesting.
But I think we should dwell on it because this is what this equates to. We don't talk about the issues that men face, even in a patriarchal society, even in a capitalistic society. We don't need to cry for the rich, but I think we can cry for the middle class, or what remains of what was the middle class. They might be doing better off than us because of where we are in the hierarchy of life, but doesn't mean they're not going through real issues.
Now, you mentioned someone that we know and a struggle to find a relationship, a struggle to find a partner. I feel like it's hard to take specific instances like that and project them onto something like this. It's not like people who are having trouble in their romantic or dating lives are necessarily like the same ones who are overlapping with those who don't have any friends or those who don't have any kind of support system or social group. That I feel like is a separate issue. They're not having a lack of companionship in general. They're just having a lack of a specific kind of companionship.
I would say this.
I feel like it's a related but separate issue.
I would say it fundamentally goes down to an education issue, as far as where do you get taught how to interact with the opposite sex?
Everyone's different. You can't really teach that kind of thing.
But that's my kind of thing, is that there is no, say, structure to it. There's no standard to it. Not necessarily you can make a standard for how to interact with somebody. But I was saying is that we had the space unconventionally was school, with trial and error. And some people have the confidence, people don't have the confidence to talk up and walk to people. But there could be a way of like giving them the avenue or platform to learn. Like I know, for example, where I work, there's a special room where the kids can go and for a quiet space or get their head straight for those who have like, neurodivergencies. And I used to work in there for the majority of the time before I had my other position. And I would always be able to like help them through the noise of either school, relationships, etc. And in fact, at our faculty meeting, I said how we should have this room be more, not just for like a study hall for a quiet place, but more of like call it a translator. Because we've all been there. In high school, the most confusing time in our lives of what we're supposed to do, how we're supposed to do something. And yeah, there are going to be some kids who just won't take it seriously, as there are adults who will take a lot of things seriously. But I think having the space for it will lead to a lot more positive results. As far as what we're dealing with now, I think it should be focused on the idea of like, all right, let me see what kind of man you are that's being lonely. Are you lonely because you're entitled, or are you lonely because you are uninformed?
I feel like it's important for men and people who are struggling in the dating world. It's important to understand that you are not entitled to a relationship by any means. And that if you are struggling to find one, I feel like there's a bit of introspection that needs to happen. Like, what are your obstacles? What's happening to prevent this from happening? But this isn't a dating advice show. We're not here to fix your love lives for you. You guys will have to look into that on your own, but not to the manosphere. Those guys have
That's
no
the-
idea what they're talking about.
Yeah, they do not actually offer any real way of helping you in the things you're struggling with. Though one crazy thing, I saw a clip that I actually went to fact check because you can't ever trust anything people say on that. But this actually turned out to be true, and it was that there was a survey done about 2019 of people on Tinder, and they had 100 men and 100 women just rate the people from 1 to 5. Now with the men, there's varying degrees. There was like 2s, 4s, 3s, 5s, like something you kind of expect. But with the women, 80% 1s and 2s. Only 20% were 5s. There was no 4s, no 3s. It was a straight up almost binary like line. I was like, that's kind of shocking at first, but then I thought about like, well, yeah, that makes sense because they kind of hold the power in that situation, especially on the apps because of how those apps are structured. They can kind of pick and choose.
That I feel like talking about dating apps and how toxic their systems are is a separate issue, separate topic.
Yeah, I'm saying more goes into the mindset of what those people are saying, and thus, when you hear that, you're like, wait, first, but like I actually looked into it to make sure it was true, and it is, and then I think that lends to the credence of like, how does one interact in a system in which you're a yes or a no?
Dating apps are really hit or miss, and I don't feel like they're the go-to solution that lonely people should be looking for if you're feeling lonely in general. And I feel like if you're a single person nowadays, you're very motivated to go towards dating apps, and I feel like that's how a lot of people meet people nowadays, since like you said earlier, men aren't approaching women in public as much due to their own preferences and how, I don't like approaching women in public either. It's not my thing either.
Never was your thing.
I want to meet someone.
It never was your thing in college.
Okay, wow. I like to meet someone who I know is already interested in me. And that's understandable. And I'm sure women are the same way. They don't want to talk to strangers. They want to talk to a hand-picked person that they picked out for them already on a dating app and agreed to meet up with somewhere.
Yeah, and funny, like the last article I have talks about this epidemic, but in relation to fathers. And this talks about how, someone who became a stay-at-home dad and would, take on the, quote, traditional gender roles as the stay-at-home parent. Well, they said when they
Being
were...
a stay-at-home parent can be really isolating, too.
Mm-hmm. They said they were a new stay-at-home dad 15 years ago. They took their children to the mall, the playground, and they sat on the floor with their newborn, and they felt like there was no one they could talk to. There was a mom group that came up, had their bags and everything, and they tried to approach them, be like, excuse me, to like be social, and they just stood them off, just didn't even give them time of day. And keep in mind, this person with their child were in those places and groups, as we all know, if you've ever been with friends who have kids, you can just kind of go to a playground or whatever, and you end up intermingling with other families, make friends, play dates. That's something that's normal for, women who go with their children to parks. For a man, it's like, what do I do? Even so, how does they approach? And the biggest question they say is how to find connection and friendship, whether you are a stay-at-home dad or not, because there's no kind of camaraderie to this. I mean, this idea was made into a comedy movie. If you remember Grown Ups, the idea of parents, of the dads being the ones actually taking their kids out and doing things. You saw how much it was viewed as a joke, essentially. And like, yeah, you can't take a comedy movie super seriously, but it's more the message, the idea, as they said. What's more, men in today's society may view deep relationship as not masculine, thus further isolating themselves. Only 48% of men reported feeling satisfied with friendships, according to a survey that was in 2021 by the same of the Survey of American Life, and reported on CNN that 1 in 5 men say they've gotten their emotional support from a friend in the past week, compared to 4 in 10 women. Now, that is a problem for us in general. As men, we don't talk to ourselves.
I feel like it's important to remember that your friends are not your therapists, and that when trying to vent to your friends, make sure that they're okay with that first. Don't just dump on them. Yeah, don't just dump your issues on them, because they might not be able to be in a space where they can handle that at the moment either. So be courteous to your friends. And I talked about therapy earlier. That's something that you should talk to a therapist about. Get a little bit of, professional help. They might be able to guide you in ways that your friends are not professionally able to.
In this healthcare system,
In this healthcare system, when I will cycle that back to us being in a late stage capitalist society that doesn't have free healthcare. All right.
you're not wrong on that front. And yeah,
Or any front about this.
well, when it comes to like aspects of like taking better care of yourself on the onus of the men themselves, yeah, that's a factor. I would say doesn't need to be ignored, but I would say this shouldn't be like the forefront.
I'm not.
No,
I'm not one of those pull yourself up by the bootstraps types, but there's help that you can get for yourself and that you should seek out before you hit your breaking point. Like if you're just feeling stressed out and lonely, maybe start looking for help then instead of when you're at your breaking point and you're at your lowest and things start happening.
I feel like most men can't know when that is. They were
And I
never
feel
taught.
yeah, I mean, you might be right about that one. I feel like a little bit of introspection on that front is important too. Like, hey, am I doing okay? Am I handling all of this very well? And it's okay to not handle things very well. I think that's just been, like we talked about, like we've been talking about society and how patriarchy wants us to just tough it out and not, be affected by anything. Be a big, strong man.
But my question to you though, is this real?
I mean, statistically speaking, it's affecting men in a very significant way that it does not seem to be universally affecting other people in. So I would say that yes, male loneliness is a specific issue unto itself and perhaps more problematic than other forms of loneliness and how it's affecting certain other groups of people. I feel like the statistics can bear that point out.
Because like one of my thoughts along this was how I remember Shuan had made a quote about how someone tweeted, we need like a left-leaning Andrew Tate, and the quote was
Left-leaning Andrew Tate is something I do not want to hear anyone ever say.
Yeah,
And
that, and they brought up the point of like you don't necessarily need someone who's on a left-leaning version of this person if you would just address the root cause of why they're popular in the first place. And I think with like coming to realize this is a real thing, it will open more conversations up to, okay, so what is going through with you? Like, how would you address this? And like you said, yes, not everyone's going to be professional therapists, but I would say it starts somewhere. And if your people like lead them to say, hey, maybe you should go get therapy, at that point, it's up to them. That's the individualist in me. But I would say, like I've always said, when it comes to like policy ideals, the opportunity should be there for the people to take. But if they don't want to take it, that's on them. So, and I feel like right now, the opportunities for men to be more open, be more emotional, is actively not there.
I feel like what you're saying isn't necessarily true. Like, sure, there's a lot of we talked about how not all women are asking for the same thing. How you're saying that some women are saying, hey, men should open up more and be more emotional, which is what we're saying also. And then other people on the street are saying, hey, I kind of get the ick when men are talking about their feelings, or men complain too much about what's going on, even though they've got it made, like that kind of stuff. There's two ways to see it,
There's toxic masculinity, there's toxic femininity.
I don't like
It
that
was
term.
see what you're doing right there.
don't
You
like-
don't like the idea that someone who has had it worse can't be just as bad.
No, it's not kind of what I'm getting at. I said earlier we weren't here to attack
We're not
feminism.
talking about feminism. We're talking about femininity. like how masculinity is a perceived thing, like you said earlier, be strong, tough it out.
Mm-hmm.
If we could talk about masculinity, why can't we talk about femininity?
What aspects of femininity are you talking about?
You know, be doting, be caring, be loving. The again, all these gender roles and ideas placed upon us from older generations.
Okay,
So,
but who put those roles onto women?
it wasn't just men; it was the mothers as well, and grandmothers. Yes, we all grew up in the patriarchal society,
Right.
but to act as if though people didn't buck the system, form their own trends, form their own groups to help de-spread this in a way would be kind of like, I don't know the word I'm looking to. I think it'd be kind of undermining the whole premise of trying to change things if we didn't address the fact that there are groups of people who have gone through and educated the new generations into new generations to new generations. That's why there's like, as we say, waves. But it refers to how do we as men and women are supposed to act in society. We've gone through changes. Like, not everyone's changed, but we have gone through changes. And in order to open that up, men now are told you don't have to be as strong. You don't have to be tough. It's okay to open up your feelings. It's okay to be vulnerable. On the flip side, you have to have women who say, hey, the man is not always going to be the strong one. You're, like they say, you can be strong. You can be self-reliant. You can be just as good. It's like, okay, so let the men be vulnerable then. If you are able to be just as good, why can't they be just as vulnerable as you would be?
I think it goes back to, we've been talking about the patriarchy, and that's the same forces of society that have molded men in this capacity, have molded the expectation put on men for women in the same way. That this same society that's putting these standards on us and is having some women put those standards on us. It's the same thing. It's less blaming the women for feeling that way and more blaming society for raising women or, incentivizing women to feel that way.
But don't they say you need to be the change you want to see?
I mean, that's a fair criticism. I mean, that's perfectly fair. People are allowed to be held accountable for their beliefs, but there are there's systemic issues that we're looking at. It's not fully individual based here.
I think it's that a lot of people don't hold things to their logical extreme, and like there's a lot of people who have the ideas of something or support something that feels right, but when push comes to shove, they're not actually going to be about it. And I would say, as you've known me long enough, whenever I say I'm for something or I stand on something, I stand on it no matter what the outcome is. If I have what I believe is proof to back it up, and I feel like when push comes to shove, men and women both do not step up to the plate. And I would like to focus on how women are not stepping up to the plate as far as allowing men to feel more open. I can always address that men have lagged behind for decades. I just want to be able to talk about women doing what is happening now. And I feel like that shouldn't be taboo purely for the fact it's a patriarchal society. It's just like how I'm black and I'm in a white focused society, but I don't go around saying that, this could be better if there were less white people. This could be better if black people were more in charge. I don't say any of these things because that doesn't actually help. What I say and what I do is I try to go into the system itself and change it from within, because that's what I can do and try to find other like-minded people like that. Where is that for women going to like men's spaces that, because you could tell different types of men.
It feels kind of preachy to hear a man talk to women about things that they should or shouldn't be doing. Which it's kind of like, that's kind of the point that I'm getting at.
But don't women also talk to their man friends about what you should do if a man does this, or what? How do I get a man to notice me? Don't they do that on a regular basis? Like how we talk to women about, hey, how do I get a girl to notice me? What should I say to a girl? We already do this on a regular. We just don't do it on holistic topics. We do it on silly things, essentially, like this girl I saw at work or this girl in my class. We don't think of it again. to its more logical extreme of, okay, how do I make a man feel like he can be open with me versus how do I make a woman feel safe to talk to me?
I feel like we should just be careful when addressing large groups of people, especially enormous groups of people such as men and women, in very broad topics, especially when we're being preachy in a sense, making sweeping statements like women, you should do this. You know, that's something that I think we should just be mindful about.
Then we have to say the same for women. They
I
actively
feel
do it.
right, right. I feel like same thing goes to women. Being really preachy towards men isn't super constructive either.
Yeah, and I
I
just
feel like there's better ways to talk about things.
and also, as I always say, pick. I've been told pick your battles. Like certain places are not the place to do it. Like if you're just chilling in the student center, if you're chilling at the library, going to the grocery store, it's not time to get up on a stage and start having a sermon. But I would say if you, like we say, have those community spaces, like have a night where you can just have men and women come together, just be like talk. And I get having, safe spaces for also men and women. Like how there's a game store around the area that has a ladies' night for people who play, Magic the Gathering, because there's some issues within that community for misogynistic views, as any community of nerds specifically with men and women. But still a positive thing. I would say it's a negative. If you want to feel more included, then you can also eventually bridge that into having men learn about their faults and why this is not acceptable. This is how we can do better. I just think that the road to fixing the problem is first acknowledgement of the problem, and I feel like we only acknowledge it on one side.
Well, you are here to bring awareness to one side in particular, so I suppose you're doing that. Um,
And getting ripped for it, but like that's the nature of the beast of talking about things that I get it from the outside looking in. I'm talking about a system created by people who are suffering the system they made, and why aren't they just being it's your fault? But it's like
I think it's important to recognize the fact that not any one individual man, and barely even groups of men, are capable of changing society and dismantling patriarchy by themselves. Sure, people can take on individual responsibility and be the change that they want to see in the world, but it's like a drop in the bucket.
yeah, almost a drop in the ocean. I remember a buddy of mine. He called me as he normally does for political topics and asked me to explain privilege of all things. And he's white. He doesn't understand how it could be a thing. And it took me explaining to him that it's not a matter of financial differences, location, education. It is purely opportunity. And explaining to him that you will naturally get more opportunities than me because of how you look, regardless of what our backgrounds are. That's simply due to the fact that from the outside looking in, they only see you as a white man. They see me as a black man. Same way women see that's a man, and that's the first thing they go with. Fair is fair. Men have earned that. But I think that, the way he was open to understanding the privilege argument, we should be open to understanding the male condition.
There's one last thing that I really wanted to spend a few minutes discussing in depth, and that is, has the left abandoned men? I don't feel like it has, but I want to hear your thoughts about that. We talked a bit about how there's not like an Andrew Tate of the left, but we don't want an Andrew Tate of the left. Like that's not what our goal is. Our goal is to hear, I guess, a diverse group of opinions and get a bunch of different kinds of perspectives and make sure everyone's included on the left.
The only question I have for you is, you want to go by people in IRL or people off of social media?
What do you mean?
Because depending on where you ask for this information, you're going to get various degrees of sources.
About whether the left has abandoned men or something else.
Yes, if you go in on RIL, you'll say most people on the left will be like, "No, of course we haven't," or we're all trying to make things better for everyone, make people feel more included, make people feel safe. If you go on social media, it's going to be along the lines of, well, they can't feel not included, they can't feel special, they can't not feel safe. Everything's for them. Everything is made for them. Everything is them. Now, again, this is social media, so I take it with a grain of salt.
I feel like it's easier to find micro communities on social media, and that the people who spend a lot more time on social media are less socialized for the outside world. They're very inside their micro communities.
I think
and the current terminology for what they need to do would be to touch grass.
That one. My question to you is: when was the last time a left-leaning idea or thing was spreading around that was pro-men?
What do you mean by pro-men?
Meaning that at the center of this talking point or this movement, it was to address men in some capacity. Because the last one I remember is trans men and bathrooms.
I feel like there is a distinction that we should be making between being men-focused and being pro-men.
What would you say the distinction is?
Men don't need to be the center of attention for things to be good for men.
But wouldn't the talking point be about the group we're usually covering? Wouldn't that be pro for that group?
I'm a little confused as to why you're equating men being the center of attention and things being pro men.
What I'm highlighting is that the battlegrounds and fights we usually have on for the left, they haven't been for cis straight men.
I mean, you're right, because traditionally other groups have needed more support and more focus for their issues.
And wouldn't you say we've made progress in as far as trans men?
We have certainly made progress as society. That's not saying there isn't more to go. There isn't more that's needed.
Yeah, and I would say that that's a good thing, but let's also think about cis men as well. And I feel like we focus more on everything but cis men.
I feel like you're not wrong in the left does not have a focus on men's issues. Now, I feel like it's a little bit I feel like it's wrong to paint the entire left as like men hating or anti-men. I feel like it's just the left has largely other priorities, but there are a few things that the left does support that help men in the process. The left supports things like free healthcare, which we already talked about, would help out men ridiculously.
Therapy.
Yes, we talked. The left is very pro-therapy. They want people to get the mental health support that they need. The things about providing more community support and giving people third spaces, those are things that the left is, proponents of. Dismantling capitalism so that people aren't crushed under the weight of an economic system that makes them work themselves to the bone and be crippled with debt.
Mm-hmm.
The left wants to get rid of that. Please get rid of capitalism. Please, 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 please. But yes, so there are things that the left wants that will help men out. Now, they might not be addressing men directly in the things that they're saying, but it's not like the left is anti-men. Men get uplifted with the rest of society when we focus on societal issues as a whole. Now, I understand that there are specific issues that are facing men through male loneliness. We've gone over a bunch of them, and they are real issues. The suicide rate being sky high, being one of them that jumped out at me, and that's a real statistic, and it's telling. And we didn't really delve too deep into why men are killing themselves more, but I feel it's a side tangent from what I'm talking about right now.
I think
yes,
I think it leans into what I would say is that about the left. It's not that the left hates men; it's that the left is failing men. It's like the popular meme of the child being held by one parent and the other child is clearly drowning in the pool. I think it's a matter of you have two children there that you probably love and care for. You have to focus on one or the other. The other one's suffering because you don't happen to notice. Because
I
your
don't feel
focus
like
is
I'm
there.
drowning in a pool.
You don't feel like you're drowning in the pool because
I don't
you
feel
know
like I'm
what
drowning in a pool.
you do have a support system.
I do, and I don't feel like I am unique in that regard. I feel sympathy towards the people that are isolated, but to say that there's nothing for men on the left, as a straight white cis guy on the left who has a sense of community, I think it's kind of silly. I feel like all people need to do is care about other human beings, and they already have a good foot in the door.
Well, I didn't say that, it's a matter of not care. I said failing because, yes, people should be more communicative. People should just try to talk. But if you don't feel welcomed in that space, why would you talk? How many people do we know that get the slightest bit of negativity, even from people they are friends with and love, immediately shut down?
I feel like you're cherry picking examples.
I'm not cherry picking examples to prove a point. I'm using real world analogies to showcase that it's not as simple as just talk to people. I've told people many a times, hey, you're struggling at math, go get a tutor. Hey, you're struggling with meeting friends, go join a club. We all tell our close ones, our loved ones, things that they should and shouldn't do to improve their lives. Whether or not they do is up to them, but to act like it's as simple as just, hey, there's opportunities there, go do it. It's not how it works.
I don't feel like the left has failed men. I feel like the left could take a little bit of time and put a little bit of focus to highlight some of these issues. I feel like if you took these statistics that you found and showed them to most people on the left, they'd be like, yeah, that's a problem. That we have a mental health crisis, or we have an issue. We have lots of issues in society with this loneliness stuff, and there are things that we as a society can do to fix it, and they'll address them. And I don't feel like that's leaving men out.
I feel like that's like co-opting it into a broader thing versus focusing on the individual and not going in reverse. Primary example is with the civil rights movement. It focused on black people and went through the black lens, and then as a result hit multiple communities and essentially given everyone who was non-white rights and a liberty, pursuit of happiness, but there still was driven through the community that it was affecting.
You're right. So what I just said is that all of these things can be dealt with, and loneliness as a problem can be dealt with in society in broad kinds of ways, but that would only be because male loneliness is the one that's being brought up and being talked about and has been, making people aware of this loneliness problem. You just said that this would be sort of what opens the door for the rest of the loneliness.
And I'm saying this has to be the face.
And I never said it couldn't be.
But the way you described it just now of being a mental health epidemic, not this epidemic. Because we know from our studies, framing is one of the most important things.
Oh, absolutely.
When it comes to any movement or policy.
And
so
a male loneliness epidemic, as we've already seen with one of these articles that you showed us tonight, is
contentious.
Very.
Which with 3 out of 4 of them being more positive, being one by a woman,
Now, keep in mind, this is not a
unilateral point.
Yes, there are lots of articles that you guys can probably find about the topic from multiple different
Yeah,
angles.
CNN,
and that just has 4 of them here.
Yeah, Los Angeles Times, the UK one as well. From
He's got lots of papers here.
Medium. The point being I'm trying to make is that if you make it the face of the particular movement from the left perspective, you will garner way more support because fundamentally people want to feel like they're being seen and heard. If you just go to a group of men and say, hey, there's a mental health crisis, you should be involved, they're going to be like, because again, patriarchy, how we were raised. But if you bring up, there's a male loneliness epidemic and you probably feel, not really seen, not really heard, and want to like a place to talk about it and not be made fun of, you'll get some, not all men, but you'll get a good bit of them, and then they'll have the seedlings of change that hopefully makes the process and the problem go away as time goes on. But unfortunately, in the society we live in, not the capitalist society, but the small attention span society, catchphrases, slogans, buzzwords are all that move anything.
Now, that is important, and I think that picking like the right name for a movement or an issue is very vital, but we've also seen some of them not stick the landing. Now, there's been movements like
The Tea Party movement?
defund the police is one that comes to mind.
Yeah.
Where that is very unpopular. People do not like the idea of defunding the police. Now, there are other things that you could rename that movement to stop, police brutality,
Like
or
reform the police.
or to demilitarize. Those are all things that people can get behind. But the slogan "defund the police" did not catch on.
It did not. And
So I mean, that's something that you have to think about: should this be
the face?
the face? I guess, and I'm not convinced that it should be because of how specific it is. Not to dismiss it, because there's some real stuff going on here, but it is not conductive to getting certain people in the door, I guess.
Well, let's look at it this way from one of the statistics. They show 1 in 5 men compared to 4 in 10 women in relation to the one about parents, fatherhood, and, community seek. Let's say if we make this the face, you'll get 20% of men who haven't been here compared to the 60% of women who haven't as well.
Sorry,
So-
it's a statistic.
20% compared to 40%.
Sorry, that did it wrong for a second. But the point I was trying to make is that the 20% of men who feel they're not as, a community or sense of like companionship to the 40% of women who don't as well, they already show that as they're in a patriarchal society and with the numbers of men in the forefront of things based on that society, attracting that number of men who would want to could change those numbers. Because of 1 in 5, because in the current situation as we are, if you change it to be more inviting, you might get to equal numbers as women. And at that point, I would say that's a win. Because you can't change all men and women, but you can just shift the numbers so that it's like equal amount of men and women feel a sense of companionship and camaraderie. Solves the problem.
Yeah, I don't have any suggestions for what I would change the name of this movement to. I don't think anything's right, but then again, it's not my job to name this this movement, this effort to raise awareness.
I would say the last thing as far as the name and how to grab people, they give it like a trailer. Like, if you see something that has something that you like, identify with, or feel like it's part of who you are, mechs, explosions, lightsabers, whatever it is, superheroes, costumes, if that already is there, the people will come. So if you say out the gate, hey, we're going to address the male loneliness problem and we're going to have men feel like they actually are being seen and heard, you're just going to get men. What kind of men you get, we don't know. But I would say you'll get a lot more men by having male at the front as opposed to medical, because it's a patriarchal society, so you got to play by the game you're in. We can change the game when you get to the point where you can make sweeping changes, but as the game is constructed, I got to go for the best stats.
Well, I think you certainly will get a lot of attention from men if you put men in the forefront of the movement. Now, whether or not that is a decision that the left could own and run with effectively, I feel like there's a gap there. But yeah, I feel like you have a fair argument there that you'll definitely attract more men by making it male focused. If that's what your goal is, but I feel like it takes more than. It's about what the goal of this movement is. If it's just to help out men, sure. If it's just to attract men to the left somehow, if the left starts championing this, that's another thing. It has this issue is one that's being talked about and acknowledged in the manosphere all the time, which we've already talked about as very red-pilled and overlaps a lot with the right wing. How many of these people do you think are, in a sense, too far gone?
15%.
15%.
15%.
So you think 85% of the people that are in the manosphere are just looking for a sense of community and a sense of self-worth and a little bit of guidance, perhaps, and how to be a man in today's society, and they're just completely gettable, I guess, in a sense?
Yes. They have no training. They have no education of all to what they should or shouldn't be doing. And the first person who's given them a chance happens to be these people. It's that simple. There's nowhere else for them to go. And they, to not support, but to what the success they have shown through social media, between the Fresh and Fit, the Andrew Tates, etc., what they're showing, that will attract men who want the idea of that lifestyle.
And I can say firsthand that in many online spaces in particular, there have been people that have been very abrasive. I mean, people on the internet,
Do not care.
they don't care, and it's not their job to care. People in minority communities and in sort of more community-based spaces don't owe people who are outside of that community their time to explain things to them or to communicate with them in like super productive ways. Or not everyone's signing up to educate someone on how to navigate a new social circle that they're trying to get into. So you've mentioned before that men trying to come into like left-leaning spaces and communities are being shunned in a sense. And I feel like I've seen that to a point, but it comes down to knowing when it is and is not okay for things to just be about other people. It's like I'm not going to go into someone else's space or community and immediately make all of the issues about me.
Well, yeah, as far as
Right.
walking into it for the first time.
Yeah. I mean, you have to become a part of a community to sort of address a community in general. And I feel like there is a transitionary period for people outside of an in-group trying to come in where there's norms that they need to learn, and they're not always easy. So I had to do a lot of unlearning mindsets and behaviors that I'd accrued over the course of my life that I didn't quite understand why they were wrong, and no one was really there to hold my hand and explain it to me. It took a lot of, it takes time and it takes patience and it takes wanting to listen to other people, and I feel like a lot of men are having issues doing that.
That's because there's no consistent, and that's going to sound weird to say, but there's no consistent reward to it. And like what I mean by that is, we, from a psychology standpoint, as from my education, we do things for a purpose. And if I go to this space as a man, what is the purpose for me going there? Is it to become more educated? Is it to meet someone? Like, whatever the purpose is that a realistic goal to whatever it is they're doing? And if they feel like what they're trying to reach or what is being told they're going to get isn't something they think they need, they're going to kind of shun it. It's like how I would say I have a unique perspective in how certain things don't make me mad, they make other people mad, because I kind of can see the difference, the nuance. For example, for friends in a mood, I didn't cause them to be in a mood, and they're snapping at me. I'll be like, well, what's wrong with you? And then they say this, and I'm like, all right, I don't get upset that they snapped at me. It wasn't my fault. So why would I be upset? But there's people who would get upset at someone snapping at them because it's more of a natural, quote, reaction to most people's emotions and feelings. So when it comes to men going into this space, as most men tend to be more logic-brained compared to women who are emotional brain, from a biological perspective, that's what tends to happen. And why you'll see times where it's like, well, this is a space to talk about our feelings, talk about how I feel. Well, this is what's going through me. This is what I'm feeling. And then when they're like, well, we're not talking about that right now. Well, isn't this the place to talk about it? That's the logical disconnect right there. Is like, I was presented that this is a space to be more open, to be more inclusive. And then when I try to talk about what I'm going through, it's like, it's not your turn, or you're not the primary focus right now.
Yeah, and I feel like not every space is going to be like that. We talked a lot about generalizations before. Not all men are going to be the ones to hurt you compared to a bear. Not all women are the ones who are going to be shutting down your opinions right after asking for them. Like, these are unique instances of social interaction that we're talking about here. And the generalizations, as we've discussed, are not super constructive. So I think we've come to some level of agreement here. This is a real issue. These are real statistics. Some of them are very alarming. There are very specific consequences to male loneliness that are not as common or destructive to other groups of people who feel lonely. The quick and hard shift of young men to the right, I think, is a very visible consequence of what you're talking about, because these people are speaking to their issues in a way that not a lot of left-leaning commentators are. And I feel like we could take a look at how we talk about these things in a more constructive way. So I feel like there's a lot here that is accurate. I feel like the name could probably use a little bit of an adjustment. And I feel like if men want to fit in more in left-leaning spaces, listening more and mostly just listening more. I feel like that's how you get your in.
I would say the key thing is that it's called the
Be an ally.
Yeah, it's called the manosphere because it's supposed to attract men.
It's toxic though.
Wait, feminism attracts women because by the nature of the name, you kind of have to play the word game. It might feel icky, but if it comes down to it, if you want to move the people, you have to present them with something that they feel is for them. And if you say, hey, I want to solve the male loneliness problem, you've already got men listening to you immediately.
All right. I feel like those are good enough words to leave off on for this episode. Thank you, Matt, for coming on to talk about this and shed some light on the issues that lonely men are facing in particular.
And then if you guys want to hear any more topics of such things that, men or people like us nerds going through, I have a YouTube channel. It's called The Old Weeb. Almost at 2K subscribers. And I also have a TikTok of the same name, but 8,000 subscribers. Hope to see some of you guys there.
Yes, go flame him in the comments of his videos.
I mean, I'm in the anime community. I'm used to it.
All right. We're logging off, guys. Have a good night.